looking at a special sort of grass. Now, it's not being grazed, in fact, it's there for shelter, but it does actually produce a whole lot more grass on the other side of it. So we'll find out what it is and why it is and where to grow it. This week people are talking about the earthquake in North Canterbury. Obviously it's been a very, very dramatic week. Thankfully the government has flown in and is handing out lots of money to try to help the farmers. But there again, money doesn't always fix everything, and there's still a lot of heartache and a lot of problems, and more things will be unfolding. On a positive note though, the dairy price looks as though it could be coming right, and in fact there's now talk about a $6 payout. But we'll have more about that and about the earthquake and the relief packages in a moment. Kerry, earthquake relief, what's happening?
Yeah, well, we've had a special order in council put through. So Minister Woodhouse has come out and said, look, the normal tax rules don't really take into account in situations like this. So there needs to be some flexibility. So IRD have been working together with the government, and we've got some new rules coming out. So basically what they're saying is that if you can't pay your tax, don't panic. Try and do it if you can, but concentrate on other things, obviously. And if you do pay it late, they're going to waive all the use of money interest, and they're also not going to charge late filing or late payment penalties.
Now there is money being poured into the region as well. How does that work? Do you have to pay tax or anything on that?
Well, yeah, basically it's going to be a subsidy that comes into the business to cover your wages, so that does become taxable income to that business. So that's going to be part of it as well.
Tax evasion.
Yeah, we've had a Taradale businessman come up before the courts. He pleaded guilty to 15 charges, and he's got 9 months home detention. Basically, he tried to rip off the PAY, the GST and income tax system. The interesting part of this was that even though he's pleaded guilty, he's paid all the money back, and he was $320,000 in credit, but the IRD still went after him, and the judge still locked him up basically at home for 9 months. If
you try to do the trick here, you're going to come second.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, and this guy knew he was ripping it off and was going to try and rip it off as long as possible. He got tripped up because of the IRD stats that they keep. He had a cafe in this instance, so they were watching his wages compared to his sales, and they were out of kilter with what the rest of the industry was done, and that led them into investigations, and this is where he got caught. If it hadn't been for their system, he probably would have got away with it.
He's got 9 months to think about it.
Yeah, and the way I sort of looked at this case and read the underlying stuff, I think he'll be back trying to scheme again. I don't think he's learned his lesson.
Oh no!
But it just shows that if you try and fool the system, you will get tripped up at some point, and it may not be the way you think. I mean,
he's got a huge red flag on his number.
Oh, definitely, yeah. But these sort of people don't learn. They will try things now and then, and hopefully, I've been done once, I won't be caught again. Well, yeah, you're on their files now, so look out.
I reckon. Dairy payout.
Yeah, well, obviously we've had the announcement it's up 75 cents to the $6 a kilo. A lot of our dairy guys are quite optimistic about this. The strong demand and the dwindling production has led to this sort of forecast increase. But they're still focused on controlling the costs on the farm and looking at that debt reduction. With the low interest rates and a better forecast payout, debt reduction is still going to be a full focus for them, and that they've got to strengthen their balance sheet.
I would assume that people working on a $6 payout would be rather foolish.
Yeah, there's a lot of forecasting going on, and we're working with a couple of the major banks for some of our clients, and they've got very optimistic this one, and then where they think it's going to be, and it's actually varying between the banks where they think it might be.
So really, you should be doing your budgets on a figure a lot less than
$6. Good practice would be to say, look, be a bit pessimistic. They have got it wrong in the past. Say, look, they're saying 6, let's go slightly lower. So there's a bit of fat built into the system, so that if it is better, well, we've got some extra money on hand.
Now, wills and inheritances.
Yeah, the recent earthquakes have triggered a lot of questions, and where our phone's been going red hot from people saying, what do we do about a will? Do we have one? What do we need in it? If they're saying, do we have one? Straight away, they've got to get it done ASAP. You can't sit around and just go, oh, did we have one, not have one? If you're uncertain and if you don't even know who holds it, get a new one drawn up straight away. Don't muck around, because if something happens and you die without one, then your estate's in a bit of trouble.
In fact, you're in a lot of trouble, because does the government take everything?
If I can't find any family or anything like that, so in your will you've got to make sure, if you're giving gifts or inheritances to anyone, the good practice would be actually keep a separate document that lists all their names and addresses and phone numbers, etc. So the executive of your will can easily track these people, because if they can't track them, then in the long run, your money just goes into the government fund and they can do what they want with it.
The other little trap is that if you marry, whatever you've had as a will beforehand is null and void.
Exactly, you need to update that and reflect your latest situation. And good practice would be to talk to your lawyer, because some people do want a sort of a prenup agreement, or that's what they call it, but yeah, they just want to protect themselves even more.
Because a new bride would get very grumpy if everything went to an ex-wife.
Yes, and I've seen a situation where it's happened like that, and then it has to go before the courts, and and the judges get involved, and the lawyers, and the legal system wins, and the people that's supposed to get the benefit of the money don't get it in the long run.
Kerry, do you, as a chartered accountant, work with the lawyers as far as wills and such are concerned?
Yeah, definitely. So in our practice, we actually do the wills for our clients if they want. The legal system's been freed up a fair bit, so accountants can do a number of documents now. Lawyers have still got property conveyancing locked into themselves, but otherwise, combination lawyer-accountant can basically do everything together.
That would make a lot of sense, because everybody knows you've got an accountant, but not everybody knows what lawyer you
Exactly, and a lot of people don't even know what lawyer to use. So they go, oh, well, who do I use? They talk to a neighbour and they've gone and met that one, oh, I don't really like that person, and so they just leave it. Whereas you need your taxes done, so it's we're a good place to start with.
And the other thing is, I guess a chartered accountant knows all about your financials.
Exactly, yeah, and we can then say, well, you've got these assets, have you thought about that? Where the lawyer will sort of say, well, put a list together of what you think you've got, and then the important ones might be left out in the long run.
And you bring into account trusts and companies?
Oh, definitely, yeah. So if someone comes in for a will, that's a good time to actually sit down and look at their whole business structure to make sure it's working for them. Even talk about what their long-term goals are, because that makes a difference.
And as the situation changes, you can suggest that they would change their will.
Yes.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed. In just a moment or two, we're going to be finding out who and what Summerfruit New Zealand is. Tricia, who or what is Summerfruit New Zealand?
Okay, Summerfruit New Zealand is an incorporated society that looks after growers of cherries, apricots, nectarines, peaches and plums, and they're levy funded. We collect about $1 million or $1.1 million a year in levy, and those funds are used for industry good issues. So a lot of R&D, research and development, a lot of government work, a lot of work with biosecurity and export markets, and then there's the New Zealand market, which I look after, which is domestic sales and all the things around growing and selling fruit on the domestic market.
So you spend a lot of time talking to wholesalers?
Yeah, I talk to Foodstuffs and Countdown, and then I talk to Tuners and Growers, Fresh Direct, MG Marketing and Tuners, Fresh Max. So they're all the wholesalers, and then I have very close relationships with growers. So it's growers who are paying me with the levy. So top of mind for me is that I'm always working for our growers.
For a 17-year-old in a supermarket, a lot of them don't know what the fruit is that's coming across the counter.
Exactly. Some of them don't know what a piece of the difference between a nectarine and a peach might be. So a number of years ago, 4 years ago, we put together a booklet called Know Your New Zealand Summer Fruit, and that was designed specifically for produce managers to educate them, and that was about letting them know the different colours and aspects of characteristics of a peach, for example. You know, white flesh, yellow flesh, whether they're juicy, whether they're freestone or clingstone. But the checkout operators themselves, a lot of that fruit is all coded at the retail level. It'll come up automatically what type of fruit that is.
Tricia, you're clutching some armbands. Tell me about those.
Three to 4 years ago, we embarked on a project called Harvest Assurance Tools, and we did a survey at a conference in Blenheim that told us that growers needed tools on orchards. And so we set up this project, which is funded for 3 years with AgMart, and it was all about what tools could we produce to help growers deliver a quality piece of tasty fruit for the consumer. And wristbands was one of that.
So they're sort of colour-coded.
So what we did, it was an interesting exercise where we started with rock paper. The first wristbands were made out of rock paper, but that never worked. And we looked around, we knew we wanted wristbands because the persimmon industry had looked to have a wristband for pickers of persimmons, which is one colour. So we adopted their their secret, which is the silicone wristband, and I've spent 3 years out trialling them on orchards with growers and pickers and packers and seeing how they go. So we have a selection of colours for a number of different varieties that have been tried.
I'm just thinking, if you look at a peach, there's different varieties of different colours.
That's right. So one of the main triggers for harvest and picking fruit is the colour. So obviously the grower automatically knows when his block is ready for harvest. For a lot of identifiers for him is when they're inexperienced. A lot of them are really experienced, but the picker doesn't necessarily know what the right decision to do is when they're up in that tree alone.
So I mean, what size is one thing, but you're really just looking at colour, and perhaps is it balancing out the sugar?
These are designed specifically for colour, so nothing to do with sugar. So it's all about a picker wearing a wristband. They can wear them on both wrists, and they're alone up in the tree, and English might be a second language. They might be a backpacker travelling around New Zealand. They might be an RSE worker, and it gives them confidence in what to do for the boss. And it's a constant reminder.
And you've got some that you're still working on?
Yeah, so these colours that we've developed so far, we started with the Sundrop apricot because we grow that in both the North and the South Island. And we mastered that first in the first year to make sure that it was going to work before we looked to expand into nectarines and peaches and other varieties. And then this year coming up, we're looking to work with cherries more intensively. I was a bit thinly spread with cherries last year, so this year I've got a pretty intensive program planned for the cherry harvest.
Tell me, what's the uptake been like?
So the uptake with growers has been a little bit slow, to be honest. They've been complimentary in the last 3 years for those in the trial, and we also used our marketers to distribute them. Complimentary to growers, so they didn't pay for them and they could try them. But this year they're having to pay for them and fill out an order form, whereas a grower, he loves to drive a tractor and look after his orchard. But we do have a number of orders in. They'll be dispatched this week. They're just arriving, and then I'll be out and about and selling them at the orchard gate, really.
What's the band made of?
They're made of silicone, so they're hard wearing, and what's really interesting about that is that a picker can wear one on each wrist, and they can wear it for the harvest of a particular variety. So that I encourage the supervisors or the managers to say to the pickers, you don't have to lose this when you go home at night. You can shower in it, sleep in it, and come to work the next day and it's on your wrist. They're close fitting, so they don't get caught in the trees. I had one grower in Hawke's Bay who was a bit of a skeptic about the wristband and would it fade and what would it be like, and he wore it for a whole year, apart from one occasion where his wife insisted he take it off to go to a wedding. So he slept in it, showered in it, and I went back to him a year later and he couldn't believe that this wristband hadn't actually faded. So they're actually hard wearing, they don't rip or tear or break, and they'll last a number of seasons for a grower.
And there must be a lot of benefits.
Yeah, the benefits, there's a number of benefits, not only for the consumer in terms of what they get in the fruit bowl, because our goal is to ensure there's a delicious piece of fruit that a consumer has in their fruit bowl, and then they'll repeat purchase. So the benefits for the picker is that they can please the boss. They might not understand what he says and they nod their head and yes, they'll do that, but then they're alone up in a tree, so they've got this constant reference point of what to do. And there's a number of benefits for the growers, which is that the picker will then be encouraged to leave that underripe fruit on the tree, and get it next time when it weighs more, so it's worth more, and also the colour is closer to the maturity level, best for the shopper.
Straight after the break, we're going to change from horticulture through to cropping with Dennis Carter.
Not sure how to brighten up your backyard? Try Grow Sure Easy Flowers, all in one mix. Seed, feed, mulch. It's bloomin' easy. Be sure with Grow Sure from Kiwi Care.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
You know that saying, content is king? Well, in today's mixed media world, it's true. You need video, audio, photos and more for social media, for marketing, for communications, sales and for advertising. And you need this at a price that works with your budgets. Well, that's what we do. At Tandem, we partner with you to create the content that you can use to shout to the world or video link to a few. Connect with us and we'll help you connect to the world.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Not sure why your camellias aren't cooperating? Try Growshaw Planting Magic, packed full of nutrients in just one handful. Be sure with Growshaw from Kiwi Care.
Dennis, grass scrubs.
Yes, Rob. Set your watch at 9 o'clock at this time of the year and go out and listen, because all the beetles are emerging and flying, and you'll find that most of the ones that are flying will actually be the males looking for females to fertilise. The females come up, have a feed, and then get fertilised, and don't actually move much more than about 10 metres from where they emerge, laying their eggs, and then die. So
At least they have dinner first.
they do have dinner first before they die, and they have the pleasure of being mated as well.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. So they then lay their eggs about over the next 2 months, and those eggs will stay underground, or especially if they're covered from the sun in foliage, and hatch in about January, and the damage really starts to show up from grass scrub right through till about April, May, and when the first frost comes, farmers think, where's all my feed gone? And it's been eaten from underneath the ground.
So the eggs are actually on the surface, but the grub itself digs down.
Yes, well, the beetle actually attempts to burrow into the ground, and things like spring cultivated crops like barley, peas, those sorts of things, it's quite soft, and they do actually dig and bury their eggs in the ground. But if it's in a grass seed or a pasture sward, there's plenty of cover right down at ground level, and they just lay them there at ground level. Then the grubs hatch and go into the ground and start chomping on the roots. So you can actually get some damage from the beetle at this time of the year. They will actually eat a lot of things like cucurbits if you're trying to establish things like squash. They really attack the leaves, and some of the native trees we have too. They really have a fair old feed.
Is it right that there's a 2-year grub now?
Yes, there is a 2-year life cycle grass grub, which is a real pain, and he's a bit different. Here's a you can tell him he's got a black head, and the annual one has a brown head. So that's a bit different, but yes, they can be jolly pesty over a long, long period of time.
Now, you're talking about 9 o'clock and listening to them to know that you've got a plague. How can we prevent the next generation?
Well, you can't. It's an ongoing fight. You know, scientists and chemical companies have been fighting grass grub for a long, long time. And they do cost the New Zealand agriculture economy hundreds of millions of dollars per annum in lost production. They really are a real problem. But I was just cleaning out our swimming pool the other day and scooping them off the net after we'd filled it up with fresh water. There was, it's not a large pool, there was over 30 grass grub beetle, or bronze beetle, floating on that swimming pool. So that's how thick they are this year. So we can look forward to a pretty tough sort of a year. And with irrigation, of course, we make the ground nice and soft, we make it lush, and we have a greater survival rate. In a drought, we start to see the numbers dwindle because those eggs have been fried because of no cover.
They really don't like heavy rollers, though, as a grub.
No, or cattle, mob stocking cattle. You can actually kill the grub in the ground, but you're also pugging your ground at the same time.
Yeah, it does.
So doing one thing undoes another,
yeah.
indeed.
Staying with pests, Slugs.
Slugs, well, they're there every year, and of course with their irrigation we're helping them survive. But the worst thing about slugs is you see them there, you treat them with slug baits, they work very well, but before you've got to them, they've laid a whole lot of eggs. And so then the trick is, and the trap is, that you think you've used the slug bait, you've wiped out the population, great, can't find anything, but there are clusters of eggs, then they hatch, and then you have another infestation. So don't rest on your laurels that you think, did it once, job done. That is not the case. And in some situations of white clover crops that have been watered, I've seen, well, in fact, one of our hay sheds at home, the floor of it looked like it had been painted with silver aerosol can. It was just absolutely silver.
Slug trails.
Slug trails, just coated it like paint. And I would say that in that paddock there was probably more meat than vegetable.
Not all fertiliser trace are equal.
Yes, the trace elements, basically they're very important, and some more important to some crops than others, like boron with brassicas and things like that, sulphur. But the chelate form of, pronounced chelate, the chelate form of trace elements is the one that does work particularly well. It has a chemical claw which will bind it to the soil rather than an elemental trace element. And some of these trace elements can't actually be applied in solid fertiliser form. For instance, manganese, where you have manganese deficiency in wheat, you can't fix it by ground application. It has to be through the leaf, and preferably in that chelated or sulphate form is the best way. But the trace elements that are chelated versus elemental do seem to work, and some farmers have done tests and decided that the elemental stuff, they've measured it, didn't make any difference.
So after all that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
What's happening with white clover this time of year?
Well, this time of year, very, very important for white clover that farmers set it up for maximum flowering on the longest day. And some of that will be to do with the exposing the stolons to light and allowing all those little buds along the stolons to actively produce a flower. So evenness of the crop is very, very important, and not grazing them too late. Obviously they should well be shut up now, and in fact a lot of farmers are going out and mechanically topping.
I was just going to say use a topper.
Absolutely, use a topper, and that will even up the whole crop, allow those buds along the stolons. Hopefully there's been room for the stolons to move, which is very important. You can overpopulate clover big time. And then the secret is to have as many buds on as many stolons open to the sun to express a flower at once.
Dennis, thank you very much indeed. Changing back now to horticulture, in a moment or two we're going to find out how the season's been. Now Robin, as a potato grower, you advocate that we should keep them in the refrigerator.
Yes, definitely. I would suggest to anyone buying potatoes that depending on the time of the year, I mean our golden gourmets, they're quite vigorous little sods, and this time of the year they're in full spring mode wanting to grow again, and there's not too much we can do about that other than keep them refrigerated. So especially if anyone's got potatoes that they're not using up in a short time frame, or they've got a bigger pack that they're keeping, or probably 10 kilos not going to fit in the fridge, but I'd be an advocate for keeping potatoes in the fridge. We keep them in the fridge here from harvest time through till we wash and pack them, so they've spent sometimes months already in a 3-degree fridge out here, so continuing that on when you get home is certainly not to their detriment. It's only someone who's bought a specialty potato that they specifically want to make French fries with, that having them in the fridge for a prolonged period of time will affect the sugars and affect the fact that they may burn. But for most other varieties, better off in the fridge if you've got any issues with sprouting.
Now we've talked about potatoes, what about other crops?
Pumpkins, we're just in the middle of drilling those at the moment, so the wee shower rain we had over the weekend is just an absolute blessing for the herbicide side of things to get that activated, and even the same with all the potato crops, getting the showers of rain after the pre-emerge herbicides go on there is going to give us very good weed control. broccoli, we're cutting very, very good broccoli at the moment. We're very happy with that, and we'll be finishing out of Amberley shortly in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be harvesting down here. There's crops are going in the ground down here, looking very good. First beetroot plantings there in and away and looking well.
So you're hoping for a good season?
Well, everything's starting out very good. I mean, you know, it's been pretty good so far. We've mostly been able to get out and do what we wanted when we wanted, and I was having a bit of a joke with the boys when we were biking last Saturday morning, and I said, actually a few Saturdays ago, I said, well, if you don't put your order in, you won't get it. But I said, I've put my order in for 25 mils every Friday night. We get the 25 mils on Friday night. It'll be too wet to plant potatoes on the Saturday, but if it can clear up by Saturday morning so we can go for a bike ride, and we've almost got that. We've been getting that quite a bit through the season, so I think it doesn't hurt every now and then to put your order in for what you want. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah, okay, but so what about lotto numbers?
No, well, I haven't got that one worked out yet. I haven't worked out that one, and I haven't worked out when the ground's going to shake next, so yeah.
In just a moment or two, we're going to be looking at a grass that's not for grazing.
Not sure how to brighten up your backyard? Try Grow Sure Easy Flowers, all in one mix. Seed, feed, mulch. It's bloomin' easy. Be sure with Grow Sure from KiwiCare.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Not sure why your camellias aren't cooperating? Try Grow Sure Planting Magic, packed full of nutrients in just one handful. Be sure with Grow Sure from KiwiCare.
Chris, it looks like a grass, and I guess it is a sort of grass.
Yeah, it's a tall energy grass that originated in Southeast Asia. So it's a hybrid of 2 species, and because it's a hybrid, although it does flower, it doesn't set seed. So there's no potential of seed spread from the crop itself.
How do you propagate it?
The way they propagate it is either through tissue culture, and then you develop that into plantlets, and the plantlets are sold at about 60 cents each, and then you need 10,000 plantlets because you plant them at a metre square spacing, so 10,000 plants per hectare. Or the other way is to plant rhizomes. So if this was growing more widespread in New Zealand, then you'd have access to a rhizome source, and the rhizomes you cut up into smaller pieces and you can plant those as well.
So basically it's a rhizome?
Yeah. So the rhizome, the system of planting with the rhizome is cheaper, and the emergence rates between plantlets and rhizomes is similar, or the survivability of both is similar. This was quite a good shout about, because we only lost about 5% of the plants that were planted.
You're using this for shelter?
Yeah, the main aim of putting the miscanthus onto the farm was we wanted to put shelter back onto dairy farms, so we needed a plant that would give us a decent height, because shelter benefits related to plant height. But the problem with going above, say, 1.52 metres is the interference with the centre pivot. So you needed something that didn't interfere with the centre pivot. So the beauty of miscanthus is that it acts like bamboo. As the pivot passes over it, it just bends under the pivot. So it's not restricted in height by the pivot. And this will reach about 4 metres high coming in about January. This should be 4 metres high.
At the moment it doesn't look very tall.
The plant, the natural life cycle of the plant is that it starts to senesce once the frosts start. So you'll get your 4 metres high green growth at the end of April, beginning of May, and then the plant will senesce and you're left with this bamboo type structure, which is actually the material that you harvest. This is your fuel, renewable energy fuel, and it can also be used for calf bedding. If you chop it up, it makes really good calf bedding. It also makes a good mulch, but this is material that's left after the plant has senesced over the winter. So the shelter early spring is probably limited, and once the plant starts regrowing, then you get your spring and summer shelter. And the reason we planted it in the northern corners of the paddocks is because what we're trying to do is protect the pasture from the northerly winds. So the northerly winds are quite a feature of the Canterbury Plains. They, when they're blowing, will dry the grass out and you'll get high evapotranspiration rates. The pasture that was protected by the miscanthus from these winds had higher yields. We got up to about 14 to, in some cases, 18 to 20% increase in yield where the pasture plants were sheltered from the northerly winds.
So basically it's shelter plus bedding, and it's pretty versatile.
As a dairy, on a dairy farm in particular, we wanted plant something that's multifunctional. So you can either plant it, just keep it as shelter, and it will die back, regrow, and it's maintenance free. Once you get into its second year, there's the vigorous growth of the plant, and once it's built up a good rhizome reserve, it outcompetes any weeds, so you don't have to spray it with any insecticides or herbicides once it's been in 2 years. The first year is the difficult year in getting it established, but once you're through that first year, then it's maintenance free. And the harvested product, it works well as a mulch, works well as calf bedding. You can chop it up and use it the same way that you use straw in cattle feed. They have tried to harvest it green as a silage, and you get a silage of about 9.4 megajoules per energy. So it's probably not as good a silage for feeding your lactating dairy cows, but it's also probably good as a dry cow silage in the winter.
And renewable fuels?
Yeah. So if the technology was present in New Zealand to process this into renewable fuel, then in Canterbury we can get about 30 tonnes a hectare dry matter yield per hectare under irrigation, and then the output of that would be about 9,000 litres of renewable fuel, which can go straight into your tractor or into the milk tankers for taking the milk from the farm to the dairy plants.
I guess it's used for that overseas.
Yeah, America, they've got more developed system and they've got larger plants that actually do produce renewable fuel. So it's just trying to get that technology established in New Zealand. But it's a bit like you need the product to supply the plant, but you also need the plant there to encourage people to supply the product. So it's marrying those two together before that actually would develop.
Chris, how do people who want to grow it get hold of some?
The company that sells it in New Zealand is Miscanthus New Zealand, run by Peter Brown. He sells the plantlets at the moment and also is developing the rhizome cells as well.
It's been an interesting season, Tony. Nothing much is happening.
Yeah, since we last interviewed, we've everywhere has had another really good dose of rainfall. Particularly the western areas. I mean, they got really pounded again at the end of last week, and even through Canterbury, and although it's a little bit variable through Canterbury, but again up through the Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, they had very good rainfalls again last Thursday and Friday. So that was a week ago, and so that's just sort of put off irrigation demand again. In fact, we've still got places where they would very like to actually drain the place rather than have to think about irrigation.
And we're nearly into December.
I mean, without going and delving back through our 30-something years of records, I can't think of a season like that off the top of my head where we've got to December and we basically haven't irrigated in parts of Canterbury and the Wairarapa and parts of Hawke's Bay. It's happened on the western areas, you get up around the Pukekohe, Matamata, Owakuni, those sorts of areas, Manawatu, when we've got that westerly pattern going on all the time with the rainfall arriving. But for the eastern parts on the shallow alluvial soils, for us to have not irrigated very much is, I can't think of a season.
Which opens the door for me to suggest that because you're not irrigating, you've got plenty of time to work on your land use consents.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that to any farmers on your program, because they'll tell you what else they're doing at the same time and not irrigating. But yes, I mean one of the requirements of farming these days is the requirement to have a consent to farm, or to use the farm as a land use for a farming use as a land use. And it depends on what sort of nutrient zone you're in. So I think there's 3 nutrient zones: a green, which means that it's not an issue; orange is potentially a problem; and red, we know we've got a problem, and we've got some zones, and everybody knows that we've got those zones. So if you're in an orange zone, then June the 30th. January the 1st, 2016 was the date that you needed to have a major application for a land use consent. I wouldn't suggest that farmers get really too concerned about that, because I'm not sure that Environment Canterbury has the resources to do it and figured out exactly what the land use consents.
You say 16 or 17?
16. And if your farming practice wasn't changing, so you weren't intensifying or changing land use, then you've got a 6-month hiatus. And there was a memo that came out on the Environment Canterbury website in May 2016 that said that you've got till actually June the 30th to actually get them in. So those that haven't actually put any in, nobody's getting a non-compliance notice at this stage. Excuse me. But it's something that farmers in orange zones, and there aren't a lot of orange zones around, they're mostly sort of in the area around the south of the Rangitata area. But all the red zones, January the 1st, 2017 is the first date. So you need to have your application in by January the 1st. And then if if the farming practice isn't changing, so if you're staying as a dairy farm, or you're staying as a sheep and beef farm, or you're staying as a cropping farm, then June the 30th becomes the 6-month hiatus. Now, this is all about planners putting dates into practice. Not a lot of farmers are sitting on their backsides doing nothing between now and January the 1st, 2017. In fact, they've got more to do between now and January the 1st than most of the planners at Environment Canterbury can point a stick at. So it's the furthest thing from their mind at the moment. So not a lot of practical nous, I think, was considered about the dates. I mean, why when it's a farming consent to farm, would you make January the 1st the date to do that when it's the
start of New Year? It's a calendar.
Well,
calendar decision.
Well, that's a calendar decision. Well, it's also a planner's decision, and planners make those sorts of decisions because
they'll all be on holiday.
Well, they will be, so they wouldn't care less. But it just shows a lack of practical nous that in fact January the 1st is a terrible date to require farmers to have a consent in place. June the 30th would have been the right first date, with a 6-month hiatus after that. So anybody that's in a red zone, and so if you consider all the area between the Waimakariri and the Ashburton River, or just about the Rangitata River, then you've got to have a land use consent, and you need to be thinking about getting this done.
Are there people who can do it for you?
Look, a lot of, yes, there are. I mean, most of the consultancies around that are similar to ours will do those consents, but the main thing is you've got to have your farm environmental plan finished first. So that's a real key to having this. That's the cornerstone to your land use consent. And the other thing is it's all about record keeping. So you need to have a really good record of what you do and when you do it and how you do it, and that will go into your farm environmental plan and into your land use consent as well.
So it's more than just a diary note to say you put the rams out.
It's more than just a note to say that you put the rams out. You need to know when you applied fertiliser, how much, what type it was, when you sprayed, what you sprayed with, all those sorts of things.
The amount of spray you use.
Make sure that you can prove that you weren't within 10 metres or 10 metres, I think it is, of a waterway.
How the hell do you do that?
These days it's all GPS controlled these days. If you're spraying, most people have got GPS control on there where they know, so they can track exactly where they sprayed. They know exactly where they spread fertiliser. All these things are all GPSed and recorded these days.
So you've got your GPS at your tractor, obviously.
Yeah.
And that holds it. It's archived.
Yep. So you just download that, and it's on your computer, and you can track exactly where you spread fertiliser and how much you put on.
Whew. Okay, Tony, thank you very much indeed. Doesn't half make your head spin, does it really? Still to come on the program, we're going to take another look at that amazing grass, and also Terry Copeland will be here from Young Farmers.
Not sure how to brighten up your backyard? Try Grow Sure Easy Flowers, all in one mix. Seed, feed, mulch. It's bloomin' easy. Be sure with Grow Sure from KiwiCare.
Everybody has a story to tell. What's yours? Maybe your family has been farming the land for 5 generations. Perhaps you have invented the next best thing in agriculture, or maybe something else. Whatever your story, if you're out on the land, we want to hear from you. Get in touch by emailing us at info@ontheland.co.nz.
We're living on a planet facing almost insurmountable challenges. Challenges we have to face sooner rather than later. The world needs our energy. She needs our ideas, our passion. It's up to us to change things, make a positive change to the planet, to feed the world, to protect the future, to live well, to be the generation that will make a change. Join us.
Not sure why your camellias aren't cooperating? Try Grow Sure Planting Magic, packed full of nutrients in just one handful. Be sure with Grow Sure from KiwiCare.
Steve, it's a pretty interesting looking grass.
It is interesting, and it's more interesting because it doesn't just produce what we call renewable fuels, which is not biofuels, by the way. It's important to separate the two. Biofuels are things like maize in the USA for ethanol, and maybe oilseed rape oil. Both those plants are human foods, and they live on and they grow on good farmland. This will grow on rubbish land, and we don't eat it. So when we make fuel from it, we call that a renewable fuel, because it can keep producing the fuel and not take away important agricultural land. This is on a dairy farm, but it doesn't have to grow here. It can grow on rubbish land that's not being used for cultivation.
And the fuel's catching on?
But in the States, they have the machinery, or the plant you might say, to make it. And of course they're growing a lot more of this stuff than we are. We've developed what you might call the eco-technology to grow the stuff, but we don't have any machinery in this country to turn this cellulose, because that's what it is, it's just cellulose, into a liquid renewable fuel. We are working on that, and there's talk about investing in such machines. And our dream would be to have little machines on a farm like this, where other farmers nearby would bring their bales of miscanthus to a central point, and then make their own renewable fuel, stick it straight in their tractor, because that's what happens with renewable fuel. You don't need any sophisticated chemistry, you just whack it straight in the tractor, renewable diesel, and drive away, either in the tractor's tank, or in a tank behind the tractor or behind the truck. So that would be a dream, really, a central place of making renewable diesel for dairy farmers to share.
Now, I would probably be suggesting that you should either spray those weeds out or at least rogue them.
It does have some pretty flowers in it, doesn't it? Yes, but depends what language you use. First of all, they're not stopping the grass growing. They can't compete with this enormous grass. Secondly, they're just, the yellow ones here are just south thistle. But I can't see much evidence of it invading the pasture. I can see dandelion in this pasture, but that was here before we started. But you can easily put, when it dies down in the winter, you just have brown cellulose, so you can use a herbicide in the winter to give it a clean up, if you wish. But I don't mind. I'm not a dairy farmer. My life doesn't depend on dairying, but although part of my economy does. These flowers produce the opposite of what we call monoculture. And many beneficial insects, like bees and ladybirds, must have pollen and nectar. So on a rather sterile, no offence to the owner, dairy farm, it does provide some diversity that can boost biological control of pests.
And of course, you've always been an advocate for those little beasties that are helping people.
Yeah, a great fan of pretty flowers, really. Yeah. We've done great work in vineyards in New Zealand, especially Waipara, which we've discussed with you before. And that idea is now in use in every vineyard region in New Zealand and Australia, even in over towards Perth. So it's not just pretty flowers, they have a function in agriculture. These weeds might be weeds to one man or woman's eyes, but to me they are a little bit of extra diversity that does no harm and does provide what we call the services of nature. The good news is that Chris Littlejohn, who worked on this for 3 years of a PhD, he found many nests of bumblebees in this grass, but in the boundaries of the farm, which are just gorse and cocksfoot, there were no bumblebees nesting. And this farm has red clover in amongst its ryegrass, or somebody has to grow the seed, don't they? Not this farm, but others do. And red clover seed, to be produced, must have long-tongued bumblebees, and they nest in this ryegrass. And Chris also found that lovely New Zealand skinks, which live only in this country, occurred here in quite high numbers because of the shelter, none in the boundaries of the paddocks. So again, those environmental benefits, which we can put dollars on if we want to, certainly bumblebees, we can put dollars on their value, are useful to the farmer.
Is it going to catch on?
Well, the trouble is, if they grow it, these farmers, what are they going to do with it? Because we don't have the machines to make renewable diesel, but it can make the ryegrass downwind grow 14% more, which is worth money, because it shelters the grass and keeping the plant's stomata, their breathing holes, remain open longer. So it makes more ryegrass. Also, if you're making milk or drying out milk in a factory, you need heat from somewhere. And natural gas and coal are what are called fossil fuels, as you know. This stuff is a superb source of heat, and it could be used as a co-firing resource in dairy factories. So it's not dreamland. We just need someone to pick it up and do it as a trial. You could even turn it into little cubes, like lucerne cubes, and then you can run it on the belt that feeds coal into a burner, so you can co-fire coal with this stuff, just as a gesture that, 10%, 15%, just to give it a try. And we tried that, and it works fine. So it's multiple value.
Terry, I'm reeling because you guys are back into the Young Farmer of the Year again already.
Yeah, already. In fact, we're most of the way through our district contest and skills days program, which has replaced the old district finals thing. So we still have 22 different events around the country to try and get our competitors into the regional final selection. But yeah, it's there's no downtime anymore.
No, there's not, is there? I mean, you don't even have time really to sort of sit down and ponder.
No, but what we did do is made some changes this year to make it more accessible to more people. So when it was called district finals, there was that sort of school of thought that if you were serious, you would compete, but if you didn't quite know whether you're good enough yet, you'd sort of hold back. Now we just want you to have a go. We had a big social media campaign around have a go.
Yep. And
the really encouraging thing is we've had a lot more women competing this year, and we've got a few through to regional finals, which is really gratifying. It's 20% growth on last year for numbers. We're pretty happy with that.
20% up.
Yeah, and I think partly because it's trying to make it more accessible.
So it's really a case of, as you said, have a go. You're not going to get embarrassed if you have a go.
Exactly, and most blokes will go, oh yeah, I'll give it a go, even if you're only 10 or 15% confident that you could do the tasks. Women need to be sort of 80 to 100% confident before they put themselves out there. So this is trying to break that down a bit and go, you'd actually be really surprised what skills you've got, and if it doesn't count towards anything, it's just purely for your education and benchmarking, then just have a go, and it's really worked for us.
And I guess, Terry, for somebody who hasn't done fencing, for example, all of a sudden they go, I can do that now.
Yeah, and what we've encouraged the judges to do, if you really don't know something, then you're not being scored, so ask, and they'll be shown new skills. And so next time round, next year, actually you can be a bit more serious about it.
So these original bits, what are they, just a day?
Yeah, so district events are over one day, and we're having anywhere from sort of 15 to 40 competitors. So lots of modules to try and separate out the people. And they're good fun. They can be anywhere from being at an AMP showground to being on a private farm. So it's purely a selection mechanism to get people into the regional finals.
20% up.
Yeah, great. Really good to see. And it's sort of reflecting where we are as an organisation. The growth we've got coming through, we're seeing a lot more school age that are entering into either tertiary or on farm, joining young farmers or staying in young farmers. and bringing with them that confidence that they can do a whole lot of things.
My thought is that you really shouldn't be calling yourselves just young farmers. It should be young agricultural type people or something.
Yeah. We do struggle with our name a little bit. It's we've been around. The first club was set up in 1927, so it's we've got nearly 90 years of history. But yes, our reach and our demographic has changed quite considerably. We've got a lot of people that aren't just hands-on farmers anymore. We've got all the people that like the guests you've had on today, that support the industry, whether it be through irrigation companies or the like, and who work in the industry that support our whole primary production but don't necessarily become farmers. So yeah, we do struggle with our name time and again, but
for those people who are doing marketing or doing whatever, there's modules that they can have an advantage in?
Oh, absolutely. We do everything from HR, there's some technical things around technology. Yeah, so there's definitely areas that everyone will have some kind of synergy with. But what we're trying to, of course, find out is that best all-rounder, someone who's got great skills right across the board, academic ability, physical ability, technical ability, and a really good knowledge of the industry.
If you look at technology, for example, I mean, you look at farm consents, which are totally complicated and my head spins. But the fact that you can use your GPS and you can exceed exactly what went where. I mean, it's a technical era for these youngsters.
Oh, look, one of the things that we're marketing to, particularly in urban schools these days, is to say, well, come into the primary industry. It's not about farming necessarily, but if you're into any kind of technology, the software development that's going on in our industry is extraordinary. You're right. Being able to map a paddock and know right across the whole paddock how much moisture, how much nutrient is underneath, down to the square centimetre, is pretty amazing. The what used to be called ground penetrating radar, being able to look from above and see what the soil structures are. The technology available now that the farmer can utilise in real time, assuming your farm's got broadband access.
Yes.
There's another story.
We won't go down that track.
But and we need people that can come into our industry, that can drive that stuff, that can utilise it, that can make those productivity gains. And we're talking often up to about 30% increase in productivity and profitability by utilising technology. Young farmer members are that early adopter group. You and I, we're not very good at technology apart from using our phones a wee bit.
Yeah,
but these young
that
people,
much of the phone.
but these young people coming through are simply amazing and will take the industry massively forward.
It's got to be the most exciting era.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, the last big step forward was when we went from horses to traction engines, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, and already we're starting to see it from our teen ag and agri kids age group, primary school and high school age group, where they're already understanding that there is technology out there and can't wait for it to be adopted on their farm or in their community. So yeah, it's all about to happen.
Talk to a vegetable grower, for example, like Robin Oakley, and he's demanding information. He's going to people like Trimble and saying, this is what I want to be able to do.
Yeah, so it's really vital that we push the government into that whole RBI2 rollout, that actually we need capacity, we actually need that bandwidth to drive all this innovation and technology on farm. 5 megabits up and down isn't going to do it. We'll save that for another day.
Another day.
But what is really cool is that the guys that we've got competing in the FMG Young Farmer of the Year fully embrace all that technology. They're chomping at the bit to be pilot groups or validation groups to bring this technology to market. So we can't get in quick enough.
Very exciting times, and you've got this huge volume of people coming through the industry.
Yeah, and we've made a real effort in the last few years around that school engagement. So we've got 102 high schools that have got teen ag clubs now, which is about just over 20% of all the high schools. If we can keep engaging at that rate of growth, subject to resourcing, then we're going to bring through people that had no connection before. So the low-hanging fruit, of course, are people that have a natural affinity to our industry. The next challenge is, how do you bring in people that have had no connection? Urban kids that have got no family members or friends that have anything to do with our industry, but to say, look, you want to be involved in engineering or marketing or technology, actually our industry is the one for you.
Terry, thank you very much indeed. Now, if you'd like to recap on what Terry was saying, you can go to our website, which is ontheland.co.nz. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you've just missed the program, but I will be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now.